Good morning and welcome to ABC Chat. My name's Rich. I'm part of the team here at Kaleidoscope, and this is now week 4 of ABC Chat. Very warm welcome back. If you've joined any of our previous shows, a particularly warm welcome if this is your first time at ABC Chat. ABC Chat, apart but connected. I'm very sorry, that's just a bit of a background stuff. Thank you very much. I'll get rid of that. There's nothing like a bit of tech gremlin just to get over as we go through. ABC Chat, apart but connected. Thanks so much for joining. And today we're also being joined by David Haslam. David, good morning.
Good morning to you, Rich. How are you?
I am very well, thank you, David. David, joining us from Dorset today?
I am beautiful, sunny Dorset, looking out the window there longingly.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much indeed for agreeing to stay inside for the next 30 minutes as we are going to be coming back to you and talking to you a bit later on. But apart but connected, ABC Chat is all about bringing us together when we may all be in different rooms of our respective houses, flats, dwellings, but the need for connection has never been as great. So how can we continue to maintain those connections, continue that learning, which is so important at this time? So this is a show in 2 halves. You are most likely joining us live stream on YouTube, but you're also able to join along on Twitter. Please do use that hashtag ABC Chat to send us your thoughts, reflections, questions as we go through. We will be setting you, it's not homework, we'll be asking you a couple of questions as we go through, but please do use the opportunity to connect, to join with others. You may want to like their tweets, retweet their tweets, send direct messages, reach out to people who you may have not connected with so far. So please do use that opportunity. Today we're also using comments via YouTube. So if you want to be doing that, if you want to be adding comments to YouTube, please do that as well. So a really warm welcome to you. Please do get involved over the next sort of 20, 27, 26 minutes or so. The first question, which we are going to throw at you, is a pretty tricky one. Simply asking you, who are you and where are you joining us from today? In ABC Chat fashion, please do that on Twitter. You get bonus points if you want to include a selfie. Along with that, you get added bonus points, double bonus points. Again, we're yet to work out the distribution mechanism for giving you ABC Chat bonus points, but double bonus points nonetheless for selfies involving any form of ridiculous or even vaguely outlandish drinking receptacle. Today, I've got the Fox mug, which I have stolen from yet another of my children. A never-ending source of mugs I wouldn't normally use. David, do you have a particular receptacle there which you're possibly not top of your list for using, but you're going to use today nonetheless?
Well, it's ridiculous, but only by size. It's a rather charming mug, in fact, made by with the handprints on of 2 of my grandchildren, and it's absolutely delightful. And even for a coffee addict like me, it's slightly too big. The one joy I have just been past is my wife has just come in with this amount of Jaffa cakes. I have no idea what I've done to deserve that, but that should get me through the morning. Apparently it's just arrived at the front doorstep, so full marks to whoever delivered that.
Fantastic, thank you very much, David. We should say we're always looking for future guests to come on ABC Chat. We can't guarantee that the moment we go live, a shipment of Jaffa cakes will arrive on your doorstep, but maybe we should try and do that. David, thank you. Although that mug, I can't help but see, doesn't actually have any liquid in it.
No, but it soon will have, because, well, I'm surrounded by mugs with liquid in, but that one was too big, and I'm not even sure it hasn't got a crack in it, so...
Okay, all right, well, we'll allow you just to have it just for prop's sake for today. David, thank you very much. Again, please do let us know who you are, where you're joining from. You can do that in a range of ways. And thanks so much again for joining us. Our first section today is a chance just to look back on what we have learned over the last week. Times are changing pretty quickly, and the amount of learning, the amount of new things which are sort of coming at us, that rate is increasing. rather than going down. So what do you know now that you didn't know last week? Again, you might want to share that on Twitter, on YouTube, in whatever way you wish. What do you know now that you didn't know last week? David, what have you learned over the last week?
Well, it's the most appallingly middle class, lockdown activity that you could ever imagine, but I've learned how to make a sourdough loaf.
David, congratulations on fulfilling the cliche of a middle class lockdown. Did you have success?
Well, it depends how you define success. If you define success using the words edible, perhaps not, but it does exist. Let's at least put it that way. So that's something. First step.
Will allow existence as one part of a success criteria. Again, if you've learned how to successfully make a sourdough or other baked goods, where you want to share tips with David so that it doesn't become, well, if it does become more than just a bit of building material, please feel free to do so. ABC chat being the hashtag. I think what I've learned this week is that if you sit for 9 hours on back-to-back Zoom meetings, your back is probably going to be in a less than ideal state at the end of that. Unsurprising perhaps, but it's something which I've learned possibly the hard way. So if you are sitting there with good back muscle relief tips, I'd very much welcome them. I've also learned sort of how to fix a rear gear shift on my daughter's bike. That was slightly more successful than sorting out my back, rather. Thank you for all those sharing, learning on Twitter. We do this. Why do we do this? Because we think actually it's really important in what can seem like quite chaotic times, just to take a moment and just reflect on what we are doing differently, what we're learning, and some of what actually we might want to be continuing doing differently when a sense of new normality might resume. A theme which we might well get onto in just a second. So thanks again for people sharing on Twitter. We will move on, and this is the point in a different show where we might say our guest speaker, our presenter for today, will now present on such a topic. It's not that sort of show. This is our Jack and Ori section where we ask our special guest each week to tell us a story. ABC chat is apart but connected, but also there's a bit of anything but COVID there as well. You have to scroll pretty far down any news page to get to a story which isn't about COVID at the moment. So actually having a moment to think about topics with relevance to today, but not directly about a virus beginning with C, we think has real value. So David, over to you. What story are you going to tell us today?
Well, I'm very, very aware that those who are watching this are actually not looking at me. They're looking over my shoulder because they're looking at the shelves behind me. And I'm realizing with horror that I didn't bother to check what's on them. Because the simple fact is, with video conferencing and Zoom and all the rest, we're all looking around everybody else's houses, what they've got on their shelves, whether it's musicians doing online concerts or work colleagues in meetings. It's fascinating to have a nose around. I have to say, slightly suspicious of those who only have works of great intellect on their desk or behind them. It's much more convincing to have a pack of Pringles and a mess. But it also got me thinking about the messages that any form of personal decoration can transmit. I've always been fascinated by media interviews with doctors, particularly in the USA, whose walls are covered in impressive looking certificates and diplomas. Do they feel a need to confirm their brilliance? Is this a cultural thing in America? Is there a relationship between multiple diplomatosis and trust? And then I think of the consulting rooms of doctors that I've consulted over the years myself. In hospitals, of course, there tends to be, of course, no personalization at all. All their rooms are shared. Knickknacks would be frowned on if they were left out. But on the other hand, on the couple of occasions I've been seen in someone's private consulting room, always on the NHS, I should stress, diplomas and certificates do tend to sit on the walls. But as for the GPs I've seen and worked with, well, I've never seen a certificate yet. Family photos, yes, holiday pictures, children's artwork, the stuff that's not quite good enough to go on the fridge can go on the consulting room wall. But I'll never forget that one day in my own consulting room when I was a GP, I had a delightful little girl who was 3 or 4 years old. I've been examining her on my examination couch, and she sat up and turned to her father and pointed to a poster on the consulting room wall. This was a poster of Noah's Ark. It was all in primary colours, animals parading 2 by 2. And she said to her father, "Daddy, isn't that a beautiful picture?" And her daddy said, "Yes, it was there when I was your age." By lunchtime, it was screwed up and it was in the bin. I felt myself suitably chastised for my total failure to redecorate for an entire generation. But thinking of that story has reminded me of a new partner who joined my practice. On the Monday of his second week with us, I popped my head into the consulting room door to wish him good morning. And to my astonishment, found that he had completely redecorated. Every wall was freshly painted, different colors, a new chair, for heaven's sake, delightful artwork. It was astonishing. So I looked around and I remembered saying, "You don't get it, do you? What are you doing? You're supposed to moan about this for at least 5 years before we eventually managed to get some quotations for getting it sorted. You've put us all to shame." And well, I was joking, I think. The simple fact is that is how we normally go on about sorting things out. Lots of moaning and whinging and expecting somebody else to do it. Now, I know these ABC sessions, the ABC is anything but COVID, anything but coronavirus, but isn't it fascinating how a crisis has liberated so many aspects of health and social care in so many extraordinarily positive ways? I'm particularly thinking of the extraordinary changes in remote consulting in general practice. For years, far, far too complex, too many challenges. It was somebody else's problem. And then, within weeks, sorted. Now, the last thing we need is a crisis like this darn virus. But we also need to learn and understand how it's freed us up. How has it got rid of so many logjams? What message can we take to the future from this? How do we ensure that something great can develop out of something terrible? Because there is so much that's happened in the last few weeks that can make people really, really proud. So let's not lose it.
David, thank you very much indeed. Again, one of the shortfalls of this format is if we were in person, we would sort of give you a round of applause, but we can do that nonetheless. David, thank you. Lovely story, a lovely provocation, and I think lots for us to think about. So, question for all of you joining, whatever you might be, what question do you have for David? Sort of what question would you like to throw into this discussion, but let's use our physical distancing to our advantage. So what question would you like to ask from the safety of your laptop, which you might not ordinarily ask in person? So what one question would you most like to ask from the safety of your laptop rather than a question which you may not normally ask if you're there in person? Again, please do use Twitter, ABC chat for that, or please do use that YouTube comments function as well. And David, I'll start off if that's okay. Where we touched on this a bit with Anna Lewis a couple of weeks ago about we can have so much sort of I think we can have a lot of hope that things which we are doing now will surely sustain. You know, there's no way back after this. No way back after this. How certain are you really that some of those changes you've seen, particularly in primary care, are going to be maintained versus people just giving a sigh of relief and going back to how they acted before?
Well, I don't know if it was Barack Obama who first said, never waste a good crisis, but I think there is truth in that. And I think the simple fact is the only way that primary care has managed to function through this has been through remote consulting. And I think what's happened as a result is a lot of doctors who were deeply suspicious for all sorts of good, caring, sensible, sensitive reasons have discovered actually a lot of it can be done that way. And in which case, provided their patients are happy and they're happy, why would they wish to go back? there will be patients. I mean, the thing that worries me is an addition to sort of the inverse care law, where we get the digital divide sort of disenfranchising part of the population. But as long as we can make sure that we address that, I think there's a win-win all round here.
So yes, I think I'm going to play my role as devil's advocate here. You could equally apply your question, David, about, oh, why wouldn't you behave in a different way, to why didn't you take that poster down before you had a 5-year-old tell you it's been there for some time? There are lots of things we look at and go, well, yeah, that's obvious, isn't it? Yeah. But it doesn't change.
No, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I'd stopped noticing things. That's the key thing. And probably what a situation like this does is just open our eyes in the same way that 4-year-old opened my eyes to what I thought was a delightfully friendly looking consulting room. I mean, it was. Let's be fair. It just happened to have been there for 20-something years.
27 years, not the recommended half-life for posters in a consulting room, although it just does normally appear to be about the half-life for the magazines in the waiting room.
Well, one of the frustrating things, I mean, you say that, Rich, but I had a rule in my practice that nothing more than 3 months should be in the, older than 3 months, but very, very kind patients would come and leave things in the waiting room, including once a 1962 Reader's Digest. So, they're just trying to keep the cliche going.
They just really wanted to pass on that classic edition of 1962 Reader's Digest, which I'm sure everyone can remember fondly, or maybe not. So David, let's continue that then. In terms of, that's a lovely point about noticing and actually just being aware of new ways of working and how we then just make that part of our practice. There'll be a lot of changes which people are making now, which is sort of through there being no alternative. So it's almost forced on people. Well, what advice would you give to people about going beyond that to actually reevaluate some change which may not actually be made yet, but is within their gift and would actually help them better address some of the changed circumstances now?
Yeah, that's the sort of question that needs 3 hours, one side of the paper only, doesn't it?
You've got 90 seconds, so yeah.
One of the problems, I think, particularly in primary care, but it's applied across the whole health service, has been the lack of time to stop and think. So everyone has been like hamsters on treadmills, being so busy, and of course incredibly busy at the moment. Though intriguingly, sort of the actual demand within primary care seems to be somewhat lower for slightly worrying or very worrying reasons. Are the wrong people not attending, if I phrase that sentence in a logical way. So it's a question of somehow in one's working time, having the opportunity to step back. Even better, get somebody else to have a look at your work and get them to do it as well.
Lovely. David, thanks very much. And thanks all for sending questions through. Rose, thanks so much for joining, Rose. Question saying, how can we model this type of quick learning and innovation when we're not in crisis mode? So we can actually think about the specific innovations which we might take back, but how do we take this mode of learning back?
Well, what's happened is we've looked at this from, I mean, we've almost taken out the alternatives, because the simple fact is in the digital world, there hasn't been the alternative without massive risk of face-to-face. So it's almost taking, what are the alternative ways that we could be doing this? Going back to my poster story, you stop noticing. Well, you do things the same way. I'm struck that I did things much the same way for a career in general practice that lasted 30 years. I rarely step back and say, hang on, is there a different way of doing this? And there's all sorts of opportunities to that. It's getting off the treadmill for a moment.
David, thank you very much. A question from Andrew. David, if you were going to take one change which has been made in this period and see it sustained indefinitely after this COVID-19 has passed, what would it be? So just one change which you've seen. What would you take and make sure that it's sustained? Here we can compare notes. Well, shall I start with mine? Shall I start with mine, David, and give you 5 seconds to think? Now, I think there's been something really remarkable about, I'm trying to think the non-jargon way to say it, but sort of workforce flexibility, and how you've seen people, sort of stuff all across the NHS, respond really willingly to having to work in new ways within their roles, or actually working in completely different roles. And you've seen some of the new sort of house of some of the new Nightingale's hospitals being staffed in particular, which has sort of involved levels of flexibility we would never have expected. So I wonder if there's something about how we can just view what a job is in the NHS, in health and care, in a different way, and actually try and maintain some of that willingness to move at short notice because it is the right thing to do for patients. So there we go. So that's my one. David, over to you.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, God knows how many sessions I've been to over the last 30-something years about skill mix and about the skills escalator and all sorts of terms like this. The simple fact is people have just got on with it. Now, the thing I really want to change is no more nonsense talking about low-skilled jobs like in the care sector. Like the lower down the pecking order you are, the lower your skill. No, they're just different skills. And we're recognizing the one fabulous thing that this dreadful epidemic has done is woken everyone's eyes up to the complete inverse relationship between pay and value to society.
What do you think? Is that going to happen, David? What's your gut feel in terms of whether that will sustain?
It'll be fascinating it's absolutely fascinating to watch. My horror is that it probably won't. We'll go back to, a celebrity worshipping culture. But I think it just has been interesting to see how many eyes have been opened in this. And who knows? We can but pray.
Well, let's see. And again, welcome reflections we go through. Lots of stuff coming through on Twitter. Chloe talking about how we can bring together sort of health, sort of social care, voluntary sector voices. So let's come back to that in one moment. Change at the moment. It doesn't build in a huge amount of time for let's say cross-sector collaboration. And actually, is there something there? But are we rushing into changes where actually there could be more benefit in talking across sectors a little bit more than we're doing? And then Kate, thanks so much for joining. Kate saying, am I being too pessimistic? Kate, surely not. I think that'd be very surprising. I can't help thinking when we start working out what we've dropped along the way, rules we stepped around, processes we ignored to get here, we'll find that hanging on to these new things is harder than we thought. I think point there, really nicely made point, thank you much, Kate, is are we getting excited about things partly just because we haven't had time to think of the reasons why we haven't done them before? David, thoughts? So how do we bring together different voices? And then in our rush to do new things, are we actually forgetting some important points, which when we remember them, will actually mean that continuing doing these things is less likely?
Key bit, yeah, I mean, it's really good points there, but the key bit is to keep values to the fore. Why are you doing this? Who are you doing this for? If it's so, the early days of computing, I got the sense that an awful lot of it was being done for the clinicians who were excited by it, but without any real benefit to the patients. What we have to keep in mind here is real benefit to real people, real families. And as long as that is it, that's your prime driver, rather than excitement about innovation, then I have much more hope. I think there's real risks if you over-focus on the technology rather than the point.
I'm bringing together different voices, David. David, one of the hats you wear is as chair of one of our major charities. I'm really interested in your reflections about how you see different sectors, different parts of the health sector working together now, and are there ways which we need to think a bit more in a slightly more sophisticated way about what different parts of the health sector can bring if working together?
Well, I mean, of course, it's been complete and total nonsense for years that we've had this extraordinary split between health and social care, when the two are so totally linked in with each other. And again, I think this has opened everyone, as I said the word everyone, I just hope I include politicians in that, because I hope they recognize also the real critical importance of getting this sorted for once and for all. How many more commissions do we need to look into social care? And I'm not just talking about for the elderly, I'm talking particularly about those who need additional care across the community. And it's just been madness to have them separated as they are.
and potentially, yes, another opportunity for change when we come through from this. Just coming back to Kate's point about rules and processes which have stopped us doing things before. David, we're in an interesting situation. So both you and I used to work at regulators in the past, where a lot of regulatory activity across health has been sort of suspended in terms of when we need to allow health and care services to focus on what they need to do, which rather will beg quite a few questions when this period has passed about why are we reintroducing it. Reflections, David, on how some of those rules and processes will need to change at the end of this as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a great fan of rules and processes if there's a point to them. I'm an absolute sort of hater of them if they're just there because someone thinks they're a good idea. They've, it's got to be focused on the real world, on real benefits to people. And yes, if there's a process or a rule that is there designed to protect, heavens, I mean, what we are seeing all the time at the moment is this balance between risk and benefit. Do we end lockdown? Do we keep it going? Not we, do the politicians. You can see these debates happening. Exactly the same happens to so many aspects of regulation. Do they cause more problems or more benefits? And just keep asking that question. Whatever you do, keep asking that question. And that involves using patients and people who use services as absolutely core parts of your teams.
Lovely. And that period for reflection, I think, will be something really interesting to see as we come through this, as we go through it, but then as we come out of it, how do we make sure we build in that time for reflection and learning? Time is as always against us. And David, I'm tempted to ask you this wonderful question which just come through about whether we as humans need either a crisis or some competition to take a step change in how we do things. We've got about 12 seconds, and so you can just say yes or no if you really want to, or we can come back to that later.
I'm more than happy to answer it in one word: maybe.
Maybe. Great. Okay, good. Well, ABC Chat, the place you come to for definitive answers and clear learning. David, thank you very much indeed. Thank you all who joined on the discussion. Again, this is a topic which we could be talking about for days, if not weeks. We've truncated it now. But David, is it okay if people want to follow up, to contact you on Twitter? Is that okay?
Of course it is, yeah.
Lovely. Excellent. Thank you. And we'll be sharing those details in just a moment. Last couple of minutes left available to us. As always on ABC Chat, we want to build in a bit of time just to give thanks to all those who are doing things which we're particularly grateful for at this moment. So question for all you joining, who'd you like to give a standing ovation to this week? So that might be someone very, very near to you. It might be friends, family, colleagues. It might be a combination of all three. It might be an organisation you've seen doing particularly good work, or a whole group of people who you'd just like to doff your metaphorical cap to this week. There's an organisation we'll want to thank in just one moment. But David, who'd you like to give a standing ovation to this week?
Well, you mentioned I chair a charity, and I've really had my eyes open to the world of charities and how their lives have been absolutely decimated by this. The end of things like the London Marathon means funding for so many charities has just plummeted. And so I want to doff my hat to folks working in charities across the board who are really struggling, many of them on furlough. But so often the demand is still there for the thing they provide, and the ability to provide it's just disappearing.
David, a lovely one. Thank you. We'd certainly fully endorse that at Kaleidoscope. And the organisation we'd like to single out for standing ovation this week, well, it's sort of loads, but it's about food insecurity, and we want to particularly give a standing ovation to the charity Banquet, which works with food banks across the country, including the one which is most local to us here in Southwark. So COVID having a real impact on food security for some of the most vulnerable in our population. The work of people like the Southwark Food Bank, the work of people like Banquet trying to provide support to those working food banks across the country, invaluable at this time. And we'd like to sort of give due thanks to all they're doing. So for all those, all of you are joining, want to give a standing ovation to all those working in charities particularly hit by funding issues, to Banquet and Southwark Food Bank, we will give a standing ovation for that. Thank you very much indeed. fantastic work, and we greatly appreciate it. We're going to follow that, but just by saying this is a new thing for us at Kaleidoscope. At the end of this, there will be a very short evaluation form, which we'd love you to fill in. We will give at least £3 English to Southwark Food Bank for every one of those forms which are filled in. We really want your learning. We really want your insights to help our learning, rather. So even if you don't want to spend 3.5 minutes filling in an evaluation form, hopefully you might want to spend 3.5 minutes donating £3 to a worthy cause. So we don't really mind which motivation you run with, but for every one of those forms, we will donate £3 to Southwark Food Bank. That link is on Twitter. It's also on the YouTube page if you're watching later on. Please do give us your reflections. So with the time now at 11:30, we will say thanks so much for joining us today. Please join us next week, 11 o'clock, Thursday's Kaleidoscope YouTube, where we'll be joined by the wonderful Charlotte Hawes from National Voices. Please join us then. David, thanks so much again for joining us. Thanks to all who've been playing along at home, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks. Goodbye.